Enough power to break my reality? Ryuk muttered, confusion lacing his tone. But then the vortex sealed shut and vanished, restoring the sky to its calm, unbroken blue. I didn't even get to say thank you for all of this. The essence in this space was incredibly pure and in a crazily concentrated amount. The reason for that was simple. True dragons had once resided in here. If Isha and the rest were to regularly spend time here, like they once did when he had the pet space, then their cultivation and evolution would undergo an incredible boost. Besides, it felt good to finally have something like the pet space again. He turned away from that and to the violin in his grasp, and Ryuk could almost hear her words repeating. The violin of Mechirasa has just a single god ability, to change every beast it attracts into that of draconic blood. This violin's an artifact made from a god tool. If that's the case, then it should share the same ability. She did say its effect might be weaker, but also that it can grow stronger. The only problem is, I have no idea how. Maybe the more I play and the more beasts it enchants, the more its power also grows, he thought, taking his seat on the ground, his back resting against the tree's bark. Once he felt at rest, his hands lifted the bow and set it gently upon the strings. A soft melody bloomed through the garden, and as the notes carried on, Ryuk drifted once more into silent slumber. The ocean floor stretched endlessly, a graveyard of silence, where light itself might not reach. The weight of water pressed down, layer upon layer, until the very thought of air felt like a memory. In this place where not the slightest amount of light could be seen, something flickered. Light, and it wasn't just one silhouette of it either. It was an array of light, mostly bright pink and shimmering purple. The glow rippled across the ground, as though something buried beneath the surface was releasing the refractions of light. And indeed, an object was truly buried, as just after an hour of these light refractions, it began. Congratulations. Host Absolute Evolution has been completed. The host spark has reached a new hierarchical level. Congratulations. Host has awakened new skills from reaching a new spark, and the All-Skill Evolution card has been used to upgrade/evolve all of the host's previous and newly awakened skills. Host has gained a primordial title, Epicus Tyrannis. The notification blinked before Ryuk, a golden panel illuminating the darkness that had swallowed him for longer than he could remember. Slowly, the golden light around the panel chased away the surrounding darkness, and once more, he felt the control of his body returning. But this time, his body felt weird. What was the word? Might? Power? No, it was something more abstract. A sensation he couldn't name. As much as he felt his own body, he also felt like he wasn't within it. Like he was there but also everywhere at the same time. In a way, it reminded him of the first time he had seen Amamura while coming from Endearth. He had seen that golden world that looked like 100 Endearths gathered into a single place. The aura of the angelic being, who seemed to cradle Amamura within her palms. That feeling of awe was the same he currently felt, except that the awe now came from his own vessel. The light flickering from the absolute bottom of the pitch-black sea began to swell, growing so bright it was as if a second sun had been born in the depths. The flicker of light was so powerful that the sea's color shifted entirely into an array of countless hues, and for a brief moment, the waters flowing through every part of Amamura changed their shade. The event happened faster than a finger snap, forcing millions of angels and fallen angels near the sources of free-flowing water to halt in their steps, their brows creasing at the strange scene. But that millions quickly turned to billions when the next wave of abnormality occurred. All of the beasts in Amamura fell. Those who were on almonds in the sky were all sent plummeting down when the Ammonius suddenly descended from the sky and then fell on its side. All beasts pulling carriages froze in their tracks, then collapsed to the side, tilting the carriages as gasps of shock broke out. In reaction to this abnormal event, it took less than 30 minutes for the entire media to start buzzing, comms and cameras raised high, capturing beasts slumbering and water bodies losing their natural colors. The greatest anomaly occurred when all the technological cameras and Amacoms suddenly began to glitch, and then they died. Billions of Amamorans, angels and fallen angels, foreign races, young and old, men and women, strong and weak. All of them who had undergone a fusion with Amacoms suddenly had their Amacoms shut down. A world-level panic attack unfolded in less than an hour as everything came to a crash. The Amanet was lost, cameras ceased to function, and TV sets went dark. But then, something flashed in the sky of Amamora. It was a holograph that showed an angel with features obstructed by golden energy. Wait, is that the Amamoran satellite projection? What was before them wasn't any ordinary TV broadcast. It was a broadcast made using the satellites that hung completely outside Amamoran's planetary range. The following broadcast could not be believed. Attention to all individuals currently present across the geography of the planet Amamora. This is a planetary-level emergency. The following message is issued under full authority and unanimous agreement of all global leadership councils of Amamora. There is no room for speculation regarding its authenticity or legal standing. Amamora is currently facing an unprecedented, unidentifiable, and unanticipated phenomenon, and as of this broadcast, all technological systems across the planet have been rendered completely non-functional. All known bestial species have entered a state resembling partial biological suspension or half-death. The color and chemical composition of all natural water sources have undergone a complete and unexplained transformation. In direct response to this threat, we are now initiating the Grade 10 Evacuation Protocol, the highest level of emergency procedure authorized for planetary crisis. This is not a drill. What? As the global population reels from this announcement, the message continued. Please remain calm. Stabilized vortex portals will now begin manifesting across all populated regions of Amamora. These portals will transport you directly to fortified emergency bunkers, where Amamoran officials are already stationed and prepared to receive and coordinate safety efforts for all evacuees. From this moment, you have exactly 30 minutes to evacuate. Any individuals who remain outside the bunkers after this window closes will not fall under the protection or liability of the Amamoran state. We implore you, leave everything behind and enter the nearest portal immediately. Do so not only for your own survival, but for the continued existence of our people. We thank you for your immediate cooperation, and may Amamora endure. A strange whirring sound accompanied every single beating that arose from his heart. The two different sounds continued in their beats, and when they unified into one wavelength, a pair of eyes was forced open. Shimmer. A blinding ray of shimmering purple and pink burst out from the sandy depths of the sea, rushing through the atmosphere. It brightened up to the clouds with such power that the clouds within a 50-meter radius were immediately dispersed. The light continued to extend farther and farther until it pierced through the stratosphere, shining into the deep, dark void. He felt the control of his body rapidly return and tried to push himself up. The thought alone set it in motion. A mysterious force gripped his being and lifted him into the air. Yet his mind reeled in shock as he caught sight of an abnormality. Somehow, the clouds that would normally be high above were now around his chest area. Raising his head just a little, he could see the dark void of space, along with the rotating satellites caught in the planet's gravitational field. Turning away, he looked downward, and he saw the entirety of Amamora. Tiny little buildings and houses spread across the land, with strange dark vortexes hanging in the skies all over. Why am I so high? You mean tall, host. Right now, the host is exactly 10,000 meters in height. 10,000? That's insane. He muttered, placing a more serious observation on his figure. It was uniform, massively so, the entirety of his skin, covered in a mix of clean and smoothly aligned snow-white nano-like plates and draconic scales. On their surface, purple runic lines lined over them, sending out ripples of an aura that silently infiltrated the surrounding space. Right now, he looked like the humanoid fusion of a scaled draconic beast and a machine of living nanotech. Surprisingly, though, the height seemed natural to him. His hands moved as naturally as before, his fingers clenching and unclenching. But even that small action was enough to create thin lines of exploding black holes and brew forth dark chasms in the space. I feel different, he thought, eyes closed, with fingers clenched into his fist, as he fell silent. But then his ears suddenly twitched, the sound of something rushing through the air. His gaze zoomed 43,000 kilometers ahead, and he could clearly sight the dozens of fighter jets speeding forward, their direction locked onto his position. Ryuk shut his eyes once more, as a ripple surged by the side of his neck, followed by a silent whirring sound. His eyes opened an instant later, a neon blue flickering from their depths. Weird. I feel like I'm connected to them somehow, Ryuk muttered, stretching a hand toward the distant ships. A pulse of blue light faintly glimmered across his palm, and a change immediately occurred. At first, the jets blazed at Mach 200, but in seconds they screamed past 300, then 500, until they tore through the skies at Mach 1000. At that speed, the ships began to break apart, unable to handle such a velocity. Before they could collapse completely, he noticed figures leaping out of them, and then, kaboom! A powerful explosion rocked the space as the dozen fighter jets detonated at the same time, a towering mushroom of energy radiating through the sky. Just as I thought. The connection wasn't imagination. His thoughts alone acted like accelerators, amplifying the ship's speed, and indirectly their destruction. The figures who had leapt free from the fighter jets were angels, and none was below Apocrypha in power level. What drew his attention most were the three beings at the front. They were angels, yet unlike the others. Their forms bore 8 wings rather than the common 4 or 6. Their bodies radiated light so intense that they held the same waves as those of the brightest stars in space. Hovering a kilometer away from him, they did not instantly engage in combat. Instead, they voiced out, "You have breached the Amamoran airspace, unidentified, and hence tagged an invader. State your purpose now." It wasn't one voice that spoke. It was exactly 3, layered into one, almost like the 3 8-winged angels were talking at the same time. It was a bizarre scene, but even more bizarre were their choice of words. "I am not an invader," he made clear, as a light bloomed before both groups. It dispersed, revealing a golden card that hovered toward their group. An angel stepped out from the side, gripped the card, and eyed it for a long while. An Amamoran identification card? Quickly, an ID scan confirmator was brought out, and in just a couple of seconds the scan was done. The angel's eyes widened in shock as he looked from the images on the device back to the Titanic being towering over them. How is this even possible? Despite the disparity between the recorded height and the reality before them, the expression and features were unmistakably identical. Ryuk noticed an invisible line of thoughts pass from the angel that had tried to identify his ID onto one of the 3 8-winged angelic beings, and another line of thought followed between the trio. He felt he could easily tap into it, but he refrained from testing that out. The line of thought soon dispersed, and their voice echoed out once more. "Are you claiming this identification card is yours? Can Amamoran identity cards be unrecognizably cloned nowadays?" Ryuk asked sharply, watching them fall silent. "No, they can't," an angel replied. "You're Ryuk," the tri-echoing voice rang out. Ryuk Null, a foreigner archguard registered under the Amamoran Service Center exactly 7 months ago, the voice declared. A glint crossed Ryuk's eyes. 7 months? I thought I've only been here for 2, 3 months or so. "Yes, I am Ryuk," he replied, but they pressed. "Can you explain the reason for such a wide disparity between your recorded physiology and the current one you possess?" "It was due to a racial evolution breakthrough," he replied curtly. "You destroyed our jets," an angel shouted from the side. Ryuk only shrugged. "Your jets were moving too slowly. All I did was have them sped up to save both of us time." "Save us time?" Did he just say he destroyed a dozen A-grade fighter jets worth in billions of AMA coins just to save us time? The angel asked as if he couldn't believe his ears, and the others gave a confirming nod, which made his brows twitch. Save us time, my ass! He roared out in anger, but was silenced as the tri-echoing voice continued. Approximately an hour ago, an aura struck Amamora, resulting in planetary disasters. Disasters, Ryuk muttered. The entirety of free-flowing water in Amamora shifted its color, with possibly yet-to-be-identified changes beyond that. What's worse is that all living bestial creatures fell into slumber, neither awake nor dead, and finally, all our techno-communications, including the Amanet, have shut down. Even our Ama comms right now remain offline. We have traced the aura responsible for this disaster to this exact position, and right now the sensors are pointing directly at you. Silence followed for a while, and the angels noticed Ryuk lowering his gaze. They followed his line of sight. There they saw it. His pillar-like legs dipped into the colored sea. The sea beneath me. Could it be somehow connected to the flow of water in all of Amamora? He asked. Some of the angels' expressions grew grim, and one muttered, Norminga Bay is the center of the entire free-flowing water across Amamora. Well, I guess you have your answer for why the water changed color. Then, Ryuk replied before turning his attention away from that. As for the beasts collapsing and Ama comms shutting down, I don't know. But most likely, it's the ripple surge from my awakening, Ryuk explained. And it's still surging right now, the tri-echoing voice replied, as all glanced at the ripples of light still filtering out from the runes etched onto his body surface, diffusing into space. Seems like your newly awakened aura is the source of the disaster afflicting Amamora. Can you rein it in? They asked, and Ryuk turned to the runes on him, but then the panel flashed. You can. But it won't be happening now. You'll only be able to do that after you acclimate yourself with this new power of yours. The system notification blinked before he even tried. If it's causing crises like disrupting technological devices and rendering beasts unconscious, that's indirectly disrupting the lives of possibly millions. I can't just do nothing, he thought, and in the next moment he inhaled deeply, then exhaled before falling silent. Silence reigned, but the angels didn't interrupt, simply looking at him. All of a sudden, they watched as the lights all over his body, diffusing into the air, began to congeal around him, sneeringly forming a lengthy cocoon of light. The cocoon engulfed his entire body, rising like a tower. Then, all at once, it began to shrink, collapsing lower and lower until it stood before them at eye level, no longer forcing their necks to crane up or down. It cracked, dispersing into motes of light and revealing an entity. It was none other than Ryuk, having lessened from his previous titanic height to just about 3 meters. But suddenly, some of the angels stepped back, shielding their faces as though retreating from fire, and truth be told, Ryuk at that moment was like a flame made flesh. The space around him warped and seared, peeling apart as though scorched, while dark gashes tore open and vanished, revealing the chaotic imbalance of the surrounding space. That alone revealed the truth. I can't fully rein it in, Ryuk responded. But at least the aura is only diffusing in a concentrated, smaller space around me compared to my previous larger size, where the body surface with space was much larger and hence spreading more aura. He looked downwards at the sea, and now that his legs were out of it, the watercolor was starting to recede. A day maximum, and I'm sure the water will reduce back to its previous color. The aura in the air should also disperse, meaning all of the beasts and the technological devices should be awake soon. I'll keep a mental note to stay away from the cities for now, he concluded, the tri-echoing voice speaking after. We have no reason to believe or trust you. Your presence alone made the entire Amamora undergo a grade X level evacuation. If, for whatever reason, you revert to your titanic size, we will be forced to initiate a second grade 10 evacuation. You, of all people, should know how costly such an operation would be to our world. Besides, this event must have fractured the trust Amamorans and non-Amamorans have in this planet. If we tell them the threat has passed and it happens again, we will lose trust and, worse, crucial diplomatic ties. Other races will likely abandon the planet out of fear. So, I'll make a mental note to stay away from cities is far from enough, they said. Ryuk paused for a while, his eyes darting here and there before they paused on them, his serious expression fading to be replaced by a grin. So, the end result is, I'm afraid we'll have to put you into custody, to put it formally for you, he said, and they replied, as you can see, what is at stake leaves us no choice. Oh please, I can see how desperate you are in your heart to understand what I meant by racial evolution cultivation, Ryuk said, as he raised his right hand above his head and bent to the side, the whirring sound of machine and bone ringing out. To watch an Archguard recorded to be nothing but an ordinary Apocrypha stage level being suddenly becoming a 10,000-meter tall entity whose power wave alone is enough to force the planet into an X-grade level evacuation, Ryuk said, one of his eyes opening to stare at them. Only a fool wouldn't be itching to know more, and even if you had to do a couple of experiments here and there to realize the whole truth, it will be worth it, won't it? And who knows, maybe a few unlucky deaths? Ryuk said, rising upright after the small warm-up. The chasms appearing here and there, around him, slowly spiking up in frequency of occurrence, showing further destabilization of space, and even more angels were forced to back further away from the searing wave of aura. I understand what is at stake and my answer is, no. Ryuk voiced out, his words loud and clear. Now, if you will excuse me, I have things to do, he said, turning his back and taking a step forward. He didn't know where Zafri was, and couldn't sense her aura anywhere close to him. He needed to find her. And since 4 months or so had already passed, how was the group doing on their travels? He had quite a lot to catch up on. But he had yet to land the second step when he watched tiny strands of golden light surround every corner of the space around him. It formed a prism with Ryuk locked at its center. He forced out, turning a side glance to one of the 3 angels. One of them had his hands out towards him. As we already said, we can't take no for an answer. You will come with us, they said, this time with words more authoritative, and he turned his back to them. His hands reached out, only to be stopped halfway by a strand of light. Seems like you came prepared then, huh? He asked. We did, although it might be an overkill for a fortuitous ordinary Archguard like you, they added, but were silenced a moment later when from the side of the barrier a halo of purple light appeared. A new being suddenly stepped out, and that being was none other than Ryuk. A clone? They muttered in shock, seeing the original Ryuk was still trapped in the prism. But that was only the beginning. From behind them, another shimmer and another Ryuk. And then from above, another shimmer appeared and another Ryuk. And from below, another shimmer appeared and another Ryuk. And then from the right side, another shimmer appeared and another Ryuk. And then from the left side, another shimmer appeared and another Ryuk. In the span of 3 seconds, there was 1 Ryuk trapped in the prism of light strands and 6 more surrounding their group in a circle. You came prepared? You? Against me? An overkill? All 7 Ryuk voiced out at the same time, and then, kaboom! A pillar of golden light surged outward, and the 8 winged angels exploded forth, their aura so heavy the space itself shuddered under fallen power. But then all 6 Ryuk stretched out their right hands, and then, a single echo of finger snapping. Blood splashed into the air all of a sudden, almost as if a dam of blood had been released into the air. Heads and intestines flattened into a gory paste, almost as if space itself suddenly crumbled onto the angelic beings standing behind the trio. You will die! The tri-echoing voice rang out, eyes turning fully golden, as a feral will of anger erupted. How could they not be? The entire team of angels they had brought forth had all been crushed into a paste. The space before Ryuk rippled, as one of the angels appeared right before him, 2 of its wings slashing at his neck from both sides. It was fast, too fast. The strike ripped through the golden barrier, slicing clean across his neck. His head flew into the air as the rest of his body exploded into nothingness. But instead of blood splashing out, only motes of purple and pink dispersed through the air. Emery's paused in his track, turning behind him to look at the dispersing Ryuk. His original body is now a clone? he thought, shocked. But then, a faint ripple drew his gaze upward. There, Ryuk stood suspended in the air, one leg raised higher than the other, and then, space tightened, and the colossal phantom foot pressed down with crushing force upon his skull. His 8 wings flapped once, launching him aside with speed faster than thought. But his eyes whipped to the flank, and there, waiting, another clone, another phantom foot, slamming down toward his face. Enough! The foot hit like an atomic blast, slamming squarely onto his face. His body was violently hurled through the air, crashing into the ground before vanishing into the depths of an abyssal crater. If one could see from outside space, they would notice the whole of Amamura tilt a few meters away from its gravitational course. His physical might is overwhelming. We can't beat him directly, the duo immediately recognized, and one of them folded all 8 wings into a pattern that left a thin gap, just enough for Ryuk to remain in sight. Then, both his fingers interlocked and folded together, forming a seal in the shape of a helix. 8-winged angel helix. Karmic realm of angelic judgment. The words rang out through the air, and in the next instant, Ryuk's heart unconsciously sank in. He turned backwards just in time to witness the other versions of himself shatter away, dissolving into motes of purple light. The world darkened, and he felt the sensation of a pull, even though he remained unmoving. Tiny golden rays of light brushed against his skin, and slowly he turned to find something that froze his heart mid-beat. Behind him blazed a throne of golden fire, burning brighter than the sun itself. Upon it sat an angelic being, its very presence radiating awe and might unlike anything Ryuk had ever felt. A god? He murmured beneath his breath, watching as a palm, countless times bigger than he was, stretched towards him, and halfway through, an object appeared, grabbed by the large golden palm. It was a justice scale, its bronze pans suspended on delicate chains, one side gleaming with pure white light, the other sunk in pitch-black shadow, currently held in perfect, unyielding balance. Your good and bad will now be judged. If your good outweighs your bad, you will be allowed to live. If your bad outweighs your good, you will die. Each word was a divine decree, its mere utterance enough for Ryuk to feel his heartbeat spiral out of his control. Now you will be judged. The moment the decree was spoken, the scales began to tilt, but before any balance could be found, Ryuk vanished. In that instant, the angelic being's golden eyes lifted, only to find him, crouched upon its forehead. His right eye glinted with a gentle pink light while the left burned with a shimmering purple light. Both of their gazes collided, both devoid of emotion and recognition, and his lips moved. Who are you to judge me? You gave your divine power to angelic beings who will sacrifice their own just to be able to capture me, under the pretense of world harmony. Did you judge them first, or who judges for that bad choice you made? The divine karma scale is fair and absolute. The words thundered, and he fell downwards, his body wrapping around the angelic being's head in a bear hug. Nothing is absolute. In that instant, Ryuk ignited with blinding brilliance, cracks splitting open across his skin as though his very body was about to shatter. The angelic being on the throne had its face undergo a 180-degree change of horror, and it roared out in disbelief. What are you do? Sh? Ryuk said, his eyes locking into that of the being, as he smiled softly, while whispering it, "This will be over soon. I promise." Host has triggered a self-destruct. The explosion unfurled in silence at first, a blinding surge of destructive rays that tore through layers of existence without pause. Every fragment of the void dissolved in the glare, reduced to ashless absence, erased again and again until the act of obliteration itself became endless. The throne trembled under the expanding radiance, but the angelic being sitting on this throne did not fall. Its vast form, larger than worlds, shaped in boundless golden divinity, was immediately caught at the core of the detonation. Its golden skin, holding remnants of tiny golden stars, started to crack into rivers of void, and golden light, its divine essence, burst out of the fissures, spreading across all of its limbs. Its aura flared, a burst of golden light tearing through the destructive rays and unmaking them, while its heartbeat thundered, driving out torrents of even greater golden power. Yet even divinity itself could not resist the explosion of an epic Tyrannus. The being's chest hollowed out, its limbs fragmenting, while its face peeled back to reveal an unrelenting brilliance. The body unraveled, layer after layer, until nothing remained but raw essence, burning itself into nothingness. In the being's final moments, no! Its regretful roar was instantly silenced, its consciousness forcefully erased. All that was left was its vast, unending divine angelic essence and the half-destroyed throne that stood alone in the void even after its master had been reduced to absence. The space remained silent for 5 more seconds before a tiny light flickered out of the void. It was a cell, a simple cell in the shape of a tiny 4D prism of purple and blue. And unnaturally it hovered across this void of space, clueless, until it appeared in the world-size angelic divine essence, and right then it began to change. A faint void dotted in purple clung to its simple form, releasing an almost imperceptible pull of absorption that sucked in the angelic divine essence. As it silently absorbed this energy, it began changing and altering in size and shape to form a bizarre object. A grinning draconic maw. Hey hey hey! An almost demonic laughter of mockery rang out of this tiny draconic maw as it widened even more, pulling more and more divine essence into itself. As it did, the changes continued, its form evolving again and again, until a cocoon of purple and white formed, only to be ripped apart as a draconic claw burst out, shredding the cocoon into nothing. Coming out was none other than Ryuk, this time with his hair turned fully white and his entire body covered completely in white draconic scales. Host has been reborn. The notification panel flashed, and Ryuk's maw stretched to his ears, an uncontrollable grin tearing across his face. His scales opened up, revealing the bubbling anomalous tissues torn between flesh and robotic. And then, kaboom! The space around him collapsed into nothing, unleashing a terrifying absorption force that pulled in every strand of divine essence nearby. In one clean gulp, Ryuk devoured the divine essence the angelic being had left behind, his draconic scales now adorned in golden runic lines. Just like I guessed, Ryuk muttered as his hands raised to his face, clenching and unfurling. Engaging in fist combat with such a being was unreasonable. And even more, those simple words. If your bad surpassed your good, you will die. Those words were a decree. A true divine decree that Ryuk could feel almost immorally altering his fate. There was no doubt. Had he allowed the scale to balance and judge him, he would have placed himself wholly under its power and whatever the outcome. Something told him if he allowed that to happen, the battle he would be in would no longer have anything to do with the sitting angelic being but with an even greater primordial force far beyond both of them. So in the end, he made the most insane choice he had ever made, self-destructing himself right on top of the angelic being's head. It was the place that he had sensed held its divine core, the place where its consciousness and true source of power were held. But his own backup plan to survive his own self-destruct. The faint understanding he felt about this new form of himself. It was almost like a whisper that told him, if even just one cell of his lives, he could never die. So, midway through his charge toward the being, he had cut himself and flung the blood into the pocket of void beforehand. The explosion burned away his blood, but not completely. It left just a single tenacious cell. And with the leftover essence of the divine being's own essence, his draconic will kicked in, devouring the essence and rebirthing him. One mistake, one move too slow, one hesitation, and you would have died. Your second body doesn't exist anymore, so you would have truly died, for real. Everything would have ended. Everything. I survived. It's all that matters, he said, before his eyes drifted away to the only thing that was present in this void apart from himself, the half-destroyed throne. Somehow, the throne survived the explosion. Could it be? He murmured. In the next instant, Ryuk appeared before its colossal form and sat upon it. The moment he did, golden runes flared across the throne, converging where he sat before rising to sear through his skin, weaving up his head and face, and ending in a blaze within his eyes. His eyes snapped shut. Purple-colored veins appeared around his neck, only to quickly turn golden. Link with God Tool. Divino Scale Throne is being established. All features being scanned. All parameters accepted. A groan of pain left Ryuk's lips when he felt the stinging pain that suddenly dove into his soul, almost as if something was trying. Caution. Encroaching hidden consciousness found. System will now undergo absolute erasure of infiltrating consciousness. Erasure complete. Congratulations. Host has successfully gained a second God Tool. Golden rays of light pierced through the darkness of the void. So bright they chased away the darkness as Ryuk's eyes snapped open. There was nothing but gold in his gaze, a hint of aloofness in their depth. He raised his hands to his face, noticing the drawn runic lines. There was no sense of increase in strength or any physical difference, but he felt like he had grabbed something more mysterious. He stretched out his hands, and a mirror appeared, revealing 3 8-winged angels gazing into a chasm in the void. With a sudden clench of his fingers, the mirror shattered into fragments, the explosion tearing open a rift that hurled all 3 beings into the realm. In silence, he watched them strain their necks on appearance, their faces formerly waiting for his end, turning into horror when they looked around the void and understood where they were. And then they turned, as Ryuk's eyes collided straight onto theirs. What? I am... impossible, they muttered in shock as they looked at the being who sat on the throne. It was none other than the one they had tried to kill. How? The throne was half destroyed, and the one who ought to be sitting on the throne, one of the 3 divine angels, was nowhere to be found. Only Ryuk, his eyes flaring with that unmistakable golden light. The sight of it alone petrified them so much that it was impossible to even think of fighting back. It was akin to when a beast on a lower evolutionary scale encounters a being on a higher scale. To angelic beings, the light was all that mattered, and the one Ryuk held in his eyes right now was one possessed by a being far higher than them in the angelic hierarchy. Now, where were we? Ryuk asked, his second hand, his left, reaching out. A colossal golden phantom hand materialized, clenching down, and from the depths of the void, it emerged, gripping an object. It was a divine scale of white and black weighing pans. The trio's expressions instantly crumbled. The sight of the scale brought them such shock that 2 of them collapsed onto their knees, leaving just one standing, the one who had entrapped Ryuk in the art in the first place. Ryuk's words rang out next. The 2 of you kneeling will now be judged by the divine scale. If your good outweighs your bad, you will live. If your bad outweighs your good, you will die. He chanted. Their screams followed. Please, please don't. Spare me. I'll serve you. Just please don't judge. The divine scale will now judge. The second that was mentioned, the scales immediately began tilting. The instant it happened, both angels lunged at him with blinding speed, but he had already anticipated it. His lips opened, mouth turning to maw, with teeth turning homogeneously sharp, a sign of his draconic bloodline being triggered, and he gave a simple command. Halt! They both instantly halted in place, and the order kept for 1 second straight before they broke through it, flashing with speed towards Ryuk. 5 wings pierced forward towards him, 2 golden claws aimed for his neck, but just an inch away, they all paused. Ryuk's eyes weren't on them at all, but on the divine scale. The dark pan had fallen, lifting the white high into the air. The angels followed his gaze, and when they sighted the result of the scale, golden tears fell from their eyes. No! They began to crumble from the chest, their skin evaporating away, and within 3 seconds, they were nothing but ashes, scattering through the void and fading into its depths. 2 8-winged angels with a power level at the nihil stage were instantly destroyed in both body and soul. The sound of knees collapsing followed as Ryuk turned his attention to the last angel. They died. Oreo and Emery's died. In all of Amamora, they were the most powerful angels alive. They were the eight-winged, and only 5 of them were alive in existence. They had ruled over Amamora for centuries, rarely appearing in public perception, yet with billions of souls, angelic and non-angelic, still following their will, depicted as the Amamoran Constitution. Their emergence today to face this threat was meant to finally stretch their rigid bones. And yet, 2 of them had been erased, undone by their own divine heart that he himself had cast initially. Despair sank into Ionio's heart. How had the divine skill been hijacked? Why did he ever even use it at all? As he sank deeper and deeper, he felt a whistle behind his back, and turning his head upwards, he found Ryuk standing a few centimeters behind him as he spoke out. "Don't worry. Your life still has its use," he said, and in the next moment his hands reached into the dark void, tearing it open to reveal the golden sky of Amamora. Grabbing the angel with one of his wings, he stepped out with him, the entire realm shattering into glass fragments and fading off like an illusion. The second they stepped out of the portal, Ryuk took a deep inhale, feeling his chest growing light. For some reason, sitting on the throne gave him a heavy feeling, as if he wasn't sitting on the throne and the throne was the one sitting on him instead. It was an unbearable feeling. "What are you going to do to me?" The voice came from the side where Ionio stood, but this time he wasn't in combat mode, nor did he seem ready to engage in combat. "You finally realized it's futile?" he said with a scoff, whispering. "A pity you realized that too late." "It is not a pity. Those angels who you crushed died protecting Amamora from an evil like you. The same for Emeries and Oreo. They died guardians," Ionio said as Ryuk turned to look at him. "No. They died fools," he proclaimed, his voice unremorseful at all. "If I were in your shoes, I see 1,000 ways for a single blood not to be shed at all." The one who was responsible for the Grade 10 evacuation was an archguard whose loyalty was already sworn to Amamora. "He serves Amamora," Ryuk said. The fact that he showed his ID card instead of just engaging in meaningless combat to test his strength or whatever shows he never sees Amamoran as any evil. The evolution he went through, I would have no idea, but since he's definitely on our side, why bother engaging him in combat? If I were worried about the possibility of his evolution causing chaos in the future, or curious how he had achieved such power, I would have invited him over with an offering to teach him how to rain down his aura so as not to affect Amamora, and naturally, through that process I would know a thing or two about how he came to be what he came to be. A young talent like that should have been won over, Ryuk analyzed, before turning back to Ionio. "But what did you do? The second he said he won't come with you, from lack of trust in what you will do, you turned to force, believing you were supreme instead of trying to show you can be trusted. You could have taken a step back, but just as you said, he was just a fortuitous ordinary archguard. You looked down upon him and placed yourself on the higher pedestal you have always known. The result? You all died. So tell me, did you die like guardians? Or like arrogant fools?" Ryuk asked. "But I didn't spare you to argue about good or bad, or right and wrong," he said, cutting him off. "I have a simple order for you. Call off the evacuation and let Amamora return to normal," Ryuk said, before turning away and continuing into the distance until he disappeared from view. That's it. He had thought the young man would try to plant fear in his heart, remind him that his life was in his hands and could be ended at will. Perhaps even use him as a tool to step into the power game. But he had asked him what was bound to happen anyway, and even left right after. He remained standing in the position and eventually muttered, "We really never came prepared." "You really just decided to let him go?" The system panel flashed as Ryuk glitched through the skies. "I'm not that stupid, system," he replied, as he paused in the air, and then he closed his eyes, dipping into the subconscious. "You placed a camera on him?" the system asked, bewildered, as Ryuk's eyes opened. But when? You never had a camera or bought anything like that from the shop. It's a new skill I feel I can do. And as for placing it on him, that happened when I grabbed his wings and exited the space. It's not just a camera. It's like a soul watch that plays every single thing he does from now on, and a subconscious part of me had a singular purpose of simply watching him. He knows my identity as an archguard and, therefore, a danger. A little bit of tracking, and it's only a matter of time before he finds out that Mrs. Lanaya and old Jack, or Morgan, are related to me. If he wants revenge, he is more than capable of that, so killing him would have been the best choice. But if you had killed him, the evacuation would have been delayed, and Amamora may even descend into further chaos. Exactly. So, why not just spare him and watch him instead? He would never admit to the higher-ups if there are any that they all lost to some archguard. So, he would lie about it, say they fought the invader and he was the only one who survived or something like that. All of that just works to keep me hidden from unnecessary attention and headache. The second I sense him trying to dig deeper into my background, I can easily get rid of him, he said, without much change in expression. The panel blinked. Is it me, or does it seem like you have turned colder? The system asked, and Ryuk's hand reached for his neck, pressing lightly against it for a moment before he raised an eyebrow. No, I feel warm? Never mind, it replied, and Ryuk looked oddly before shrugging it off. He glitched once more and looked beneath him to find a humongous sea wave crashing here and there. I feel Zafar's presence somewhere in this water, he muttered to himself, and in the next instant, he glitched, disappearing again. The heavy wave of the sea paused for a moment as if stuck in time before. A powerful wave of seawater burst into the sky, resulting momentum of his diving headfirst into the sea. He continued onward through the cold, silent darkness before he finally came upon it. It was a city of high-rising spires, their sharp tips piercing up higher into the lighter area of the ocean. Even from far outside the entrance gate, Ryuk could already see various sea creatures roaming around. Zooming his gaze further, it settled upon the building at the center of the underwater kingdom, a massive structure made of glinting purple stones. From within its depths, he could sense Zafar's aura. While he felt the urge to simply give the command and have her instantly appear at his side, his curiosity caught the better of him. I wonder just what she is up to? Entering through the gate without being noticed was simple enough. He merely took a step forward, crossing with such speed that the guardians around him couldn't even register his presence. 3 more steps and he stood atop the tip of the purple building. Silently, he slipped through a slightly opened window, vanishing inside. High water Zafri, there has been a note from the Association of Waterial about the sudden change of the water's color. The voice came from an aquatic man with fish-like fins running across his face, neck, and arms. He kneeled on one knee in the wide throne room of purple stone, at whose far end sat a humanoid figure on a throne. It was a feminine figure, though eye-catching not for her beauty alone, but for the various tentacles trailing from her back, sprawling across the throne's surface. This was none other than Zafri herself. What's the report? She asked. The water's color has been reverting with speed, approximately 30 minutes ago, with about 40% of Waterial already back to normal. The association is still trying to discover if there were any further damages that might have ensued from the change, but the procession is still ongoing. Have they gotten a report about what caused the change? She asked. The finned man shook his head. No, high water Zafri. That is also in procession. Let them know I, like the other high waters, am equally interested in learning what may have led to the color shift, she said. The man bowed, rose, and exited the throne room. The golden door opened once more, and another messenger entered, a female. High water Zafri. State your report. The Aerial Association has sent an update on the evacuation above surface. The messenger reported. According to sources, the threat has been ridden off, and the people are resuming their lives on Amamora. While there has been a 7-day peace week, business procedures and daily livelihood are expected to resume very soon. The same goes for our currently dormant business procedures with above-surface organizations. Zafri hummed deeply before asking, "Has there been any report on what caused the evacuation in the first place?" "No, high water, Zafri. There has been nothing on that. Report back to the Aerial Association to dig deeper into the cause of the abnormality and have me informed as soon as possible," she commanded. The finned lady bowed and departed. "Asdal," Zafri called. From the empty space stepped a pitch-black, robed creature, its crimson eyes fixed silently upon her. "Shut the palace gates. I've taken enough reports for the day." An unexplainable noise rumbled from the robed creature before it disappeared. Dark runic lines materialized upon the massive purple gates, shutting them with a snap. The moment the snap echoed, Zafri exhaled deeply and slumped onto her throne. One of her tentacles rose, her fingers twirling idly around it as she sighed, staring blankly to the side of the chamber. "Someone seems worried." The voice echoed out suddenly in the empty throne, and it wasn't from her. Zafri snapped upright, eyes wide. That voice, so familiar. Her gaze darted across the throne room, but she found nothing. Then her other two eyes opened, allowing her to pick up on a deeper wave of reality sensory, and immediately she sensed the anomaly. Her gaze snapped toward the ceiling, only to find a pair of shimmering purple eyes, dusted with star-like dots of pink light, staring into her eyes. It was Ryuk, hanging upside down, and with a gentle push, he flipped upright and landed softly on his feet. "You're finally up," Zafri said, her voice a squeal of excitement. Unconsciously, she leaned forward on her throne, drawn toward him. Realizing her own overexcitement, she quickly pulled back in embarrassment, only for her face to flush scarlet when his arms wrapped around her in an embrace. "Why fight it?" the voice whispered into her ear. Zafri froze in perplexity for a moment, then her lips curved into a sweet smile. She closed her eyes and hugged him tightly. How much she had missed him. They parted after some time, and all of a sudden, she watched as Ryuk bent to one knee. With an expression of mock flattery, he declared, "High water Zafri, my lord." His dignified tone only made her face flush red like a tomato. "Stop teasing me," she protested, her tentacles lashing around him, hoisting him into the air upside down. "Okay, fine," she huffed, releasing him, and he crashed headfirst onto the ground. "You look quite different," she said, stepping down from her throne and walking closer. "Different?" Ryuk asked, picking himself off the ground, and watching her narrowed eyes look around him suspiciously. One of her tentacles reached forward, tilting his hair. "Your hair color changed. Half pink, half white." "It did?" Ryuk's voice was genuinely surprised. He hadn't even had the chance to check a mirror. "Your skin looks different too," she added, holding out his arm. "It's so smooth." She whispered silently to herself while muttering out loud. "Tougher somehow." Her scales brushed against his skin as her brows knitted. His flesh felt like an impenetrable white yet paradoxically, soft to the touch, giving the illusion that a single pinch might pierce it. But when she pressed harder, it did nothing at all. "And you've grown taller, too. You were about 2.4 meters before. Now you're a full 3. That's quite the changes. But, knowing you, I'm guessing that's just the tip," she said, giving him a "I know you" look. Ryuk only grinned. "Maybe just a couple more changes." "Hey, Ryuk," she suddenly called out, hesitating a bit as she looked at him. He blinked twice at her, and eventually, she spoke again in a low voice. "I'm sorry about what happened with Iris." She turned to look at him, but noticed his expression didn't change much. Instead, he had a funny smirk. "Don't be sorry about that. It was never your fault in any way," he reassured. She nodded. "I know, but after everything you had with Iris, you were so gentle with her, and for a while, I even thought she was your daughter. All of that just to be repaid with such cruelty. It must have hurt." Ryuk shrugged, taking a tap from the ground and levitating off, though in truth, he was simply flowing with the water's wave. You might not know, Zafir, but what happened with Iris, me getting shoved half to death and all, I might actually deserve it somehow. She raised an eyebrow as he went on. Truth is, I kinda saw it coming. I got warned, but refused the warning somehow. So yes, I kinda see myself as deserving it. Maybe next time I'll learn to listen. But, all in all, it wasn't really a painful betrayal moment like you think. He rested both hands over the back of his neck, then paused, turning his face to her. Or do I look heartbroken? She studied him for a moment before her expression plummeted. No, you look as goofy as ever. She scoffed, and Ryuk chuckled. Thanks for the compliment. What have you been up to all this time anyway? He asked, floating farther away. Zafir followed, her hands held together. Not much. After I left you in the lab like you instructed, you exploded all of a sudden, and I couldn't stay any closer. Even the island itself began drying up, so after waiting a couple of weeks, I decided to go on some exploration. That's how I got here. With my royalty bloodline as a Zafir Kraken, I'm now one of the High Water Lords. She explained as Ryuk quietly listened. In the end, he got the gist of things, although he hadn't known such underwater kingdoms even existed in Amamura at all. They didn't seem to have been included in the Grade 10 evacuation. And he also didn't know how Zafir had become a Water Lord. Was she chosen, or did she fight for it? But he understood the gist still. To think my Zafir would be so good at authority. Color me impressed, he praised, watching her grin in pride. Nothing less is to be expected of a Zafir Kraken. Silence continued for a while before a question broke it. So, Iris has returned to her family. The bunker has been blown to dust, and you finally finished your evolution. She leaned closer, curiosity bubbling in her eyes. What are you planning now, or for the future? Ryuk thought for a while. There were many things he wanted to do, but they all came down to one. I'll be leaving Amamura. He said it curtly, watching her expression. It didn't change much, almost as if she had already expected that. If anything, he could see a faintly happy glint cross her eyes. When are you leaving? She asked. Huh? Are you planning to come with me? Of course. She gave him a duh expression. But what about what you've got going on here? You being a High Water Lord and… She shrugged. I'm only here because I have the purest bloodline around. If I disappear tomorrow, the previous guy in line will be able to sit in for a while. I bet he can't wait. Besides, receiving reports all day isn't as cool as I thought previously, so… Ryuk looked at her silently for a while, waiting for any flicker of doubt. But in the end, there was nothing. Then we leave as soon as you're ready, he agreed. She nodded, then swam out of the room, disappearing elsewhere. This left only Ryuk, floating around in the throne hall. His eyes stared at the purple ceiling for a long while. A long pause, before he quietly spoke out. Trying to keep two lives at once only delays both. That much I know now. Steely focus returned, the flowing wave around him pausing in its tracks. Now I focus on the most important. My previous excuse of not being powerful enough is no longer true anyway. So, it's finally time to be on the full offensive. I'll finish this, once and for all. A flicker of purple light rippled through the void, and silently, a figure emerged, suspended in the air above a sprawling white mansion. Blue-purple irises scanned the periphery of the building, and a moment later, the air flapped as the figure vanished. In a golden living room that reeked of grandeur, a purple-skinned lady sat on a humongous sofa, a crown of darkness resting on her head. In between her fingers was the end of a white cup, within it a swirling liquid of dark red. Her eyes were closed, head resting over the sofa. But then, the corner of her lips twisted slightly, her eyelids fluttering open. She sat upright, reaching forward to place the glass cup upon the table. You finally finished your evolution? Odette asked, as she looked at a darker corner of the room, where a figure could be seen, resting against the walls with head drooping low. Ryuk slowly raised his head. She could see it now, eyes, cold as ice, burning with a glittering pink light. Enchanting it was, yet equally dangerous. His silence, his pose. It didn't seem like the boy she once knew. He kept his will, that will to win that he had on their first meeting. Now he has that same will, burning in that silence. And more, he does not radiate that ironic weakness that had followed the will previously. She rose to her feet, her hands morphing into dark, humongous claws. They shifted to the side, and from the depths of the void, they re-emerged. Humongous axes covered in nihil energy. Odette's purple eye color softened into an abyssal dark. Her mouth widened into a maw that reached her ears, her crazed grin spreading. Finally back for a rematch, huh? Ryuk finally rose from his reclining position. Yes, I came to end it. The echo of those words had not dispersed when Odette moved. The sound of space being suppressed by an otherworldly force rang out as an axe ripped through space, cleaving forward with incredulous power towards Ryuk's neck. One move, swift and horrific in power. This was Odette. Yet, kaboom! An explosion rippled through the air, only to disperse as if its very existence had been denied by some unknown power. The sound of metal clashing against metal, and the axe was stopped dead in its tracks. Odette's eyes widened when she looked at the source. Gripping onto the edge of her axe was none other than a hand covered in white scales and shimmering particles that rapidly aligned themselves together. Her arms bulged as she exerted power, the axe cutting deeper through skin, but there was no blood. Only the same rippling of tiny nano-like particles that rapidly mended the sliced edge of the wounds. Ryuk slowly turned his head, his eyes staring into hers. The air flapped, as Odette's second axe instantly cleaved forward horizontally towards his face. It met its target, ripping open a smooth curve across Ryuk's head, but all of a sudden, his image dispersed into tiny fragments of light. A shadow. It loomed all over her, and she swiftly turned, only to watch a palm extend towards her. Reflexively, she crossed her axe, but instead of slamming into her, the palm instead grabbed the crossed axe, holding it in place. In less than a second, a black hole collapsed in the room, shredding most objects into nothing. All of this was formed from Ryuk's simple motion of clenching his fist, and in less than a split second he moved. His body lunged forward like a bow, black holes rippling forth as he bent to the ground and smashed out from beneath. It was a simple uppercut, but with enough power to blow entire star bodies to tiny bits. A thunderous explosion echoed out as a figure blasted through the skies, piercing out of the mansion's top. The shockwave of the punch was enough to blow the entire mansion into tiny bits, and Ryuk slowly took back his fist, looking up into the air. A meteor could be seen, except instead of rushing down, it was rushing upwards. The ground he stood on sank for a meter and then, kaboom! It ceased to exist in the next moment as Ryuk burst forward with speed, flashing through the skies. He continued past Odette, appearing in the space, and both fingers of his locked together, forming a massive fist before he slammed it down towards the upcoming meteor. His fist met nothing as the meteor disappeared like it was an illusion. Instead, the sound of space being cleaved rang out as Ryuk was suddenly blown away, thrown erratically for a kilometer before forcing himself to a stop. A hum escaped his lips as he felt the stinging pain behind his back. 2 deep diagonal axe wounds could be seen on his back. But then again, the nanoparcels gathered and in just 3 seconds, his back was as smooth as glass. He turned forward to see Odette slowly stepping forth towards him in space. "Your body truly went through an evolution, all right?" she said, the axe spinning across her fingers. "But that only puts you on par with my physical prowess. There's more to winning than just that." She grabbed the spinning axe tightly, shooting backward. In response, Ryuk stepped back an inch, then forward 2 more, before shifting an inch to one side and then an inch to the other. All around him, tiny black chasms silently appeared out of the void, as he continued stepping in and out by just a few inches. Odette's hands were a blur from how fast she swung her axe. The arcs of energy that followed were so fast that all the space around them could register was the chasms being opened up. But it was as if he could see the future, easily stepping around and avoiding each strike with the slightest movement. When about 1,000 chasms littered around him, Odette stopped, but not from faltering. A menacing grin appeared while she whispered, "Nihil devil art, 1,000-cut shrine." Surrounded by 1,000 chasms, Ryuk watched as they began unfolding from its dark end. They were pitch-black hands, each holding onto the phantom of a large axe. 1,000 chasms equaled 1,000 arms, holding 1,000 axes, and in the next moment all slashed forward at the same time. 1,000 strikes rippling towards him, but Ryuk never looked at them at all. His head instead looked directly at Odette's menacing grin. The sight of him locking eyes with her, just as he was about to be cleaved into nothing, made her grin falter. But then she saw Ryuk's own grin appear as his hands extended forward. Snap! A finger snap and reality altered. One moment, she stood 100 meters from him, watching in curiosity how he would escape this, and in the next, she found 1,000 images slashing forward from every corner of the space around. She reacted instantly, clenching her axe with both hands as an inhuman roar tore from her lips and her energy burst forth wildly. 2 gigantic arcs of axe flashed forward with power, against 1,000, and space immediately collapsed all around. Exactly 100 meters away, Ryuk silently watched like he was just a spectator. From the depths of the explosion, the sound of steps rang out, and he watched as a figure laced in various cuts and marks stepped out. It was none other than Odette, and though covered in purple blood, with lacerations all over, her menacing grin still remained. She heaved her axe and hurled it at Ryuk, who merely raised a finger. Just an inch before it struck, he snapped his fingers. Immediately, Odette's palm widened, and she found herself grabbing her own weapon once more. Looking forward, he now stood where she previously was. "That's quite interesting," Odette admitted, and Ryuk replied, "If you can't outsmart it, then this fight is over." "Hey, Ryuk," Odette suddenly called out, as Ryuk hummed slightly. "You wish to defeat me, don't you?" she asked, and he nodded. "Can you explain to me what exactly defeat means to you? Is there any other definition for defeat?" Ryuk asked, as Odette looked at him silently before she muttered, "So, you wish to kill me?" She whispered, and he replied, "Yes." A giggle left her lips, soon erupting into a full-blown laughter that made her hug her stomach. But when she turned to look at him, there was no change. He wasn't smiling, nor was he laughing. His eyes were focused, his expression dead serious. It led her to a single realization that gave her the feeling of something slowly stabbing into her heart. "You really want to kill me?" she asked once more. He didn't reply with words. Just silently, she watched as his hands shifted into sickle-like claws covered in white scales, their mere flicker enough to slice space asunder. The sight of them made Odette step back in disbelief. You really still held onto that thought." "I do. Even after all that. I thought you felt." She paused slightly, her teeth grinding harder. "Did you not feel anything?" Odette roared out in pain. "I spared your life when I could have ended it. I could have killed you and brought an end to everything you ever dreamed of. But I didn't. And you also saved me from certain death. When I was at my weakest, you were the only thing I confided in. In my most vulnerable, you were my safest. I thought I paid back your kindness," Ryuk said, firmly cutting her off. "You spared my life and I spared yours. That makes us even." "Even?" Odette asked. "What do you see this as? What happened to all those words of starting things anew? The second chances?" "I'm sorry," he whispered, and Odette's lips quivered for a moment before she eventually gave in to silence. A silence that continued only to be broken by the sound of something trickling down. From both her eyes, a trail of dark blood could be seen, continuing down until it merged between her jaw and fell onto the dark void, turning to ashes just after a few meters of fall. All of a sudden, The powerful wave of aura rippling off Odette completely disappeared, and Ryuk felt her vanish from his sensory range. It was like she didn't exist any longer, yet he could see her standing before him. A sudden shadow rippled out from the void behind her, so dark it could be seen even on the dark void, and that shadow soon congealed, looming behind Odette. It formed something Ryuk found familiar, a towering phantom 1,000 meters tall in height. It was coated in dark, surrounded by pitch-black abyssal energy with dots of purple all around. Its skeletal hands clutched a pitch-black scythe, and from the depths of its face, two pitch-black eyes remained eerily fixated on him. She finally released her bloodline phantom, Ryuk muttered, remembering the phantom. But the transformation didn't stop there. The phantom all of a sudden began to shrink and shrink, until it was at the same height as Odette. It was almost like a second person had appeared, but instead of attacking Ryuk, it stepped forward and entered Odette herself. The moment the fusion occurred, an eerie black light flared from Odette's eyes as a dark cloak wound around her figure, tattoos spreading across her exposed skin until her body turned pitch black. Her claws twisted to the side, and the runic tattoos continued, lurking in the space around her arms. They shone a subtle light onto the space, and it began congealing from the light. A pitch-black scythe as long as 4 meters, with its edges covered in a dark purple aura. The hood over her head was blown back, sending her hair thrashing wildly as it whipped behind her. Her face rose, and even though the tears continuously dripped now even faster, a feral, menacing grin covered her lips. A grin of the deepest insanity. It was immediately clear that this wasn't Odette. She had allowed her bloodline manifestations consciousness to replace hers. Evil bloodline manifestations like hers only have a single will. The system panel flashed, and Odette spoke up. Her voice was grating and shrill to the ear, like a banshee screaming and metallic thorns grinding into each other all at the same time. Tell me, how do you wish to die? In response to the question, Ryuk's eyes widened and he hurriedly dodged to the side. But then, purple-pink blood splashed into the air, as right from Ryuk's left shoulder down to his waist was instantly split apart, hanging 5 centimeters from his torso. GRRH. A faint groan of pain escaped his lips as he watched dark tattoos roil and trail across the gaping wound that had nearly split him in two. What's more, even as his nanoparticles tried to fix things, they were incredibly slow. Some of them erased out of existence by the tattoo that the slash had left behind. But then, the painful expression on his face slowly melted away, giving rise to a grin as Ryuk whispered, "Nice!" A phantom flashed past once more, as the second half of his body was also divided into nothing, making him appear cut into 3 parts. "Really nice. This is just what I want." A grin, like that of an accursed devil, spread across his face even as the scythe ripped away entire chunks of his body, reducing him to nothing more than a head adrift in the void. Yet even that did not last, for the scythe cleaved through it as well, shattering it into motes of purple light that scattered into the air. Odette stopped after having Ryuk destroyed, but then she turned back, witnessing as the space behind her suddenly splintered into a gigantic chasm about 10,000 meters in height. She watched in silence as 2 massive claws burst from the chasm, wrenching it wider, before a colossal head forced its way through. A head whose eyes were burning with furious, fiery, and revengeful rage. "Come, Odette, show me your worst, and after, I shall let you taste the pain of defeat." Evil cackling was all that followed as Odette wielded her scythe and disappeared from where she was. In the next instant, Ryuk completely ripped his upper torso from the chasm he was in, and his incredibly massive right palm slammed down with full force upon Odette. It was as if the entirety of the void they were in was caught in that palm and being pushed down, exerting monumental pressure. It did nothing to stop Odette. Her eyes burned furiously with abyssal light, as her scythe lengthened to 10 meters and she spun. The void was cleaved apart, a purple axe slashing forward with world-slicing sharpness. It appeared right before Ryuk's hand and slashed through it cleanly, a total of 3 fingers flying into the air. Odette herself appeared behind the arm, the feral grin widening. But then, A sudden heat caught her attention as she turned to the side, only to find Ryuk's second palm completely casting a shadow over her. But they weren't coming forward. Instead, massive nozzles, like the end of a bazooka, had shifted out and were currently burning furiously with destructive energies that altered reality around them, all over the dividing lines on his fingers and palms. Ryuk roared out, and immediately, over 500 nozzles released forth an arc of destructive energy, so powerful the void itself lost its dark color, replaced by something indescribable. Over 500 pillars of such destructive energy slammed toward a single being, but she never took a single step back. Like one with a survival IQ of 0, Odette rushed forward instead, her scythe lengthening to 100 meters, before her hands raised to her head, bringing the scythe overhead, and then she slashed down. Evil Nihil Art. Nihility Rend. Kaboom! The space all around was immediately destroyed. Odette herself swallowed within the explosion, but Ryuk didn't wait for it to quell down. With reality altering and fraying from the power level, he dragged himself fully out of the chasm, and he raised his legs. Instantly, everything below his right ankle shifted into a massive blade wreathed in blue energy. In the next moment, he raised it high overhead and brought it crashing down toward the chaos left by the explosion. Like a knife through butter, the altered foot blade completely cleaved through an already chaotic reality. The sound of iron clashing against iron resounded, and within the explosion, one would see Odette's scythe clashing powerfully against the blade overhead. Sparks furiously burst out, soon turning blue as both refused to give in. All of a sudden, a void vortex materialized by the side of Odette's ribs, and then, another powerful pillar of energy came through. She seemed utterly helpless. Trying to reclaim the scythe and defend would only get her cleaved by the foot blade, while letting it strike freely could very well end the fight. Evil Nihil Art. Abyssal Hands of Namora. Immediately, the energy blast about to slam into the side of her ribs was stopped in its path when a hand of darkness appeared from behind her back, clashing furiously against the pillar of energy. The darkness was already being blasted away, but it also exhausted the destructive energy. It didn't last, as the pillar of destructive energy ripped a hole through the dark arm and slammed into Odette's side, blowing her away from this part of the void. Odette spun uncontrollably, her feral grin wiped off, and left with a tight teeth clench. She forcefully came to a stop and looked at her side, noticing the robes on that side had been ripped off, revealing the purple skin, which was currently sizzling with bizarre white flames. Bastard! She cursed out through gritted teeth as she looked at Ryuk, noticing him now completely burning in white flames. The aura of those white flames was even more overwhelming than she had witnessed silently the last time. His hands reached out, and the white flames coalesced together. Nanoparticles rippled, and soon enough they formed a two-edged dagger. Both blades curved like an H with the attached other end shorter. Their edges burned with these white flames, and Ryuk's own hands reached out, completely severing his own hands from his shoulders. The hand instantly burst apart, leaving nothing but nanoparticles that rapidly mended together. Right before Odette's abyssal eyes, she watched as the hands were reconfigured into massive, gigantic chains, and Ryuk gripped them, cocking the end of the chain and the dagger together, with his hollow white eyes staring directly at her. Let's begin. The void all around turned white as the chain dagger began spinning. Odette blasted off her feet, piercing through the void, as her scythe also furiously spun in her arms. When Ryuk flung down the chain dagger, sending it slashing forth towards Odette, Odette's scythe also stopped spinning, stretched back before she cleaved forward with power. For the next few seconds, there was nothing but absolute chaos in the void. Scythe and dagger clashed with world-ending power, each equally bursting out with energy unique to only them in the entire universe. The sigil of white flames versus nihil energy. None of the energies gave way at all for each other, but one could sense who was winning. Though every strike was enough to cleave apart reality, Odette still moved forward, blocking off the chain daggers and flashing forward continuously toward Ryuk. Soon, she was 10 kilometers away from him, and when she took the next step forward, Evil Devil Art. Distantio Animalio. Immediately from the void surrounding her, two dark palms appeared, covering her figure tightly. The dagger cleaved into it, reducing it to motes of light. But then, right beneath Ryuk's jaw, the hands rematerialized as Odette stepped out. The nihil energy around her furiously burned, its dark color completely disappearing to be replaced by a purple. And her body expanded up to 20 meters, covered completely in thick purplish veins. With Ryuk's unguarded neck before her, she furiously hefted the humongous scythe of 100 meters and slashed forward with every single remnant of her energy left. The scythe landed right on Ryuk's undefended neck. Purple-pink blood burst out like a dam, as Odette's scythe completely cleaved through his neck. The nanoparticles furiously hardened to block her strike, but each was cleaved apart by that unshakable nihil energy, and his head soared forward into the void. Odette didn't hesitate. Her grip tightened on the scythe as she flashed forward, appearing right before his severed head. She raised her scythe upwards and called out, "Ultimate nihil evil. Ever fade slash." From the depths of space behind Odette, a hand emerged. Her scythe vanished from her grip, dissolving into purple light that shot into the vortex. A moment later, it reopened, revealing a gigantic scythe, its haft clutched by a coal-black, ashen claw. It seemed the claw of some ancient devil, radiating a sickening amount of death aura. In the end, the claw grabbed the scythe and then, it followed Odette's motion as it cleaved downwards towards Ryuk's face. His eyes were locked squarely when the scythe edge appeared right upon his forehead, and it cleaved through in the next instant. Both heads divided, brain matter cleaved into the same halves before they could rain down into the void. The severed head was instantly consumed by the purple energy and soon reduced to ashes, as Ryuk's head faded away completely. The instant it did, Odette's scythe reappeared in her hands, and she cradled it with both hands, watching the cracks that had littered every inch of the weapon. In the next moment, it shattered into pieces before crumbling to ash, and Odette collapsed to her knees. Most of her robes had been torn apart, her body covered in gash wounds that still burned with white flames. Those sent a sting of pain right through her soul. Her teeth were tightly clenched from the pain, but then she smiled. A wicked smile of relief and a brilliant grin. "I won," Odette thought to herself. Who would have thought that the little helpless kid from back then would one day force her to take the consciousness throne from Odette? Even through her eons of existence and millions of years of battle, this was by far the most difficult of all when it comes to brute force. But then, her memories drifted, and something pricked her. For one who had been cleaved straight through the neck and then through the face, how come she never saw that familiar expression, that horror of dying, the regret that usually spills forth in that moment? Those eyes, they had been too calm. Could it be? She thought in disbelief as she snapped her head backwards. And in that moment, her eyes widened in shock. Standing before her with flaming white eyes was he, Ryuk. He wasn't gigantic, just at his original height, but not a single sign of injury could be seen. Reflexively, she stared at his neck and noticed not the slightest sign of injury. Reflexively, her gaze turned, and she saw his headless, gigantic body still hanging in the void, but it didn't fade. It remained hanging there with just the head missing, and it was still brimming with life aura. Ho! How? She wondered in shock, but her hand reflexively clenched harder. But then they clutched onto nothing. Her scythe had been broken, leaving her weaponless. She rose to punch at him, but she had only risen to a knee when she collapsed as she was sent down the void. "I can't move a muscle." She was grabbed by her hair and raised high, onto her feet, dangling in the void. She watched in anger and irritation as his second hand morphed out of shape, rapidly realigning and forming the sharpened end of a blade. And all of a sudden, this blade burned not with the usual flames but with a familiar energy. A dark energy covered in purple particles. It was her nihil energy, the purity of which left her in disbelief. "Tell me?" Ryuk said, bringing her out of her disbelief, just for a sudden stinging pain to sneak through her being. Her lips opened, and pitch-black blood burst out from them. Her eyes widened as she looked at the end of the blade that had stabbed into her. But it didn't stop. Ryuk's arms stretched, each part sharpening into a blade that sank deeper and deeper into her navel, the pain rippling through her very soul. "How does it feel to give it your all and fail?" he asked as her teeth gritted in anger, only to succumb to pain as another wave of blood burst out. Purple flames raged out of the blade, devouring her every cell and sending forth an even more mind-numbing pain. "It leaves a terrible taste, doesn't it? That helplessness as you realize all your efforts are futile." Ryuk spat, the memories of his brutal defeat replaying in his head at that moment. "It's a sickening nightmare, isn't it?" he asked, as Odette finally reached the edge of the blade. Both their eyes stared into each other, and all Ryuk saw was anger and rage. But it was soon replaced by pain. A second blade stabbed through her, hot and fiery, ripping out chunks of organs from behind her back. Blood burst out, and when he looked into her eyes now, his eyes glinted with light. "Ah, there it is, that horror of helplessness. Even you yourself aren't beyond it, it seems," he said, but the world was starting to turn blurry. She could feel her life slipping, and what's more, her hold on this body was also slipping. "Let me ask you something," Ryuk whispered to her. "If I suddenly spare you now, do you think it would ever stop that biting anger you feel every time you remember your helplessness? You think it gets rid of the nightmares that you remember as life is continuously pummeled out from you? And what's even more disgusting? It's when you realize why this is but a nightmare. You were pitted. You just sound like a sore loser who couldn't accept his defeat," Odette said, as Ryuk hummed silently before nodding. "You're right. I don't accept defeat," he said just as the notification appeared. "Epic Quest. Defeat Anihil has been completed. Are you happy now?" The words rang out from Odette's lips, and Ryuk's hands moved, ripping them out of the void. He watched falling down the void without moving, but right then the panel flashed. "She'll die from those injuries." The system panel flashed, and Ryuk simply remained in the void, humming beneath his breath. "The quest has been completed, Ryuk. Don't tell me you will really just watch her die. After all that?" "All what?" Ryuk asked. "Stop acting like some edgelord. You know what I'm saying." It fired back at him, and Ryuk's eyebrows knit for a while before he responded. "Everything we were was just like Morgaine said. I admired her, due to her strength, due to the fact that she rendered me helpless even after I gave it my all. It was the first time I gave it everything and still failed. But now that I've won, that admiration would naturally fade away, and all we have ever been will be nothing." He responded. "Has it, though? Has your admiration really faded off? Do you feel any different now after you won?" "What do you mean?" "Some fights are better lost than won, Ryuk. You'll never be the same again if Odette dies, trust me." It said. Ryuk's eyes remained steely cold, even as Odette disappeared into Amamura's atmosphere, rapidly plummeting to the ground. But then his hands clenched into a fist. He glitched out of existence, and in the next moment he reappeared in the skies, his hands reaching out and grabbing Odette's arms. She was stopped just a few meters away from crashing into the sea. Carrying her in a princess's carry, a light flashed from his hands as a golden pill appeared. He tried to place it in her mouth, but then she spat it out and it fell into the sea. "I do not want your pity," she forced out, though her teeth clenched the next moment from pain. "You'll die," he said curtly with a deadpan expression, but her expression didn't change. "I've delayed that long enough," she said, dark blood flowing out of her lips faster. "Why, though?" she suddenly said, and Ryuk watched as her hands shakily raised up, brushing against his face. "Why do I feel so sad still?" she whispered as tears, pearly silver in color, flowed down her face. "I don't want to leave you." Her hands faltered and fell to the side, eyes losing their light. A flicker of light flashed in Ryuk's eyes, his deadpan expression thawing, and his eyes all of a sudden turned teary. How could I be so foolish? His claws shifted to his neck, and he tore open a gash on the side of his neck before lowering down. She could feel it. Even through the darkness that wallowed against her, it was like a ray of light piercing through the gloom. Her eyes opened and she saw the drop of blood that came closer and closer within reach. Her lips unconsciously parted, fangs growing, and she gently pierced it into his neck. The sensation she felt could not be put into words. It felt like life itself, the purest of it, was being sent into her. But was that the reason? The reason for this warm feeling she felt in her heart? Her strength and her breath rapidly returned, and then came reason, causing her eyelids to flutter open as her lips parted. The first thing she saw were those eyes, shimmering purple dusted in pink motes of light. The sight of them should have sent her into fiery anger, but something else occurred to her, causing her to ask, "Why?" "I want you to live," he responded. "But why?" I don't know," he whispered, turning away and avoiding her gaze. But he couldn't hide it, the pink blush on his face. "And I thought I was the only one who felt that way." Her hands suddenly shifted to claws, and then scratched at Ryuk's hands and then let go, resulting in her falling into the water. He looked at the scratch mark on his wrist, before he also Sinto the ocean, but she wasn't far away. She was just a meter away, and her hands reached out, suddenly pulling him closer, and their faces appeared mere centimeters apart. Heart pounding hard, both purple eyes staring silently into each other. Odette's lips moved, though no words came out. Still, they made Ryuk's eyes widen in shock as Odette's eyes shut closer, her face turning away. But then, she suddenly felt a hand gently cradle her face, and she opened her eyes, only for them to widen. It was soft and warm, gently pressing against her lips. It was his. A fiery wave rushed into her blood, and her eyes shut closed. Her hands reached for his back, hugging him tighter as she kissed him in return. In that moment, nothing mattered more. Not the fact that they were sinking deeper and deeper into the sea, and eventually, they parted, both with faces covered in pink. "I love you too," his voice carrying even through the water all around. A line of tears unconsciously streamed down her face, only to fade into a tearful smile as they both reached out, falling into another deep kiss. Odette had no idea when it started. At first, she had simply found him interesting because of that unique Nullic transformation of his. Even though she could have ended him when they first met, she chose not to at first because of the transformation. She wanted to know how he came by it, and what his relationship with Faith Vorgoth truly was. But even more was his otherworldly potential. His being able to resist her in a fight for so long, even while being 2 major stages of cultivation less than her. She had simply found him quite impressive at first. But things started to change, and eventually, she had realized something she always thought would never happen for a being like her. She had fallen for him. "Wah!" A loud exclamation left Ryuk's lips as he looked before him. It was another gigantic castle of a building, made with shimmering purple gems, the design of which left him unable to muster a word. It had to be one of the most grand and mighty-looking buildings he had ever encountered, and to think such a place existed in Amamura. But then, Ryuk's eyebrows creased as he turned to look over his shoulder, staring suspiciously at Odette. She blinked twice in confusion at his suspicious stare before asking, "What? Don't tell me you snatched this off some poor oldie," he said as Odette humphed at him. "What do you even see me as, some evil tyrant?" she asked, continuing forward towards the building. "That's exactly what you are," he thought silently. But then, it occurred to him internally too as he completed the thought. "At least you were. Don't stand there all day. Come on in." She waved from the garden within. Ryuk finally rid himself of the doubts, stepping in through the gate that gently shut behind him. It was like stepping into a new realm, reminding him of the sensation of entering the garden of roses and lilies in his dream. "That's interesting," Brilliant purple rays of light flickered from the lampstand positioned by the side of the bed, where two figures currently lay. One was Ryuk, whose gaze remained upon the ceiling, his eyes robotically following the glimmer of neon purple light that ran around the pop ceiling. And just by the side of his face was none other than Odette, her shimmering purple eyes casting rays on the side of his face. But looking at her lips, one would see an almost devilish grin, and eventually, Ryuk turned his face to her, only to yank back in shock. He almost fell off the bed, but Odette grabbed him and pulled him back up. Except she might have pulled him a little too close. He tried to shift back, only to be stopped when her legs wrapped around his, halting him in his tracks as she leaned in even closer. "You did that purposefully," he protested, and she cackled evilly. "You're rightfully mine now, so I can do whatever I want. Right now, I want you closer," she whispered darkly. Ryuk rolled his eyes, shutting them tight when he found her face unbearably close, only to open again when he felt the kiss on his lips. As much as he wanted to stop, it felt too intoxicating. He asked, "You've always been trying to sneak kisses on me. Happy now?" She nodded fast like a rabbit. "I am. Tisk, evil tyrant. And I noticed. You've always been denying me of it though, but that just makes me want it more," she said, watching Ryuk pause before he rolled his eyes. He tried to turn away, but she caught his face, whispering, "Why do you deny me?" "Deny you?" he asked innocently, but it only made her erupt in a giggle. "You've always been denying my kiss, just like you said." "Why?" she asked, and Ryuk's lips moved, but no words came out. In the end, he shrugged his shoulders. "Don't worry about it. Is it because of her?" Odette asked. A glint crossed Ryuk's eyes, and he asked, "Her?" "Yes," Odette replied. "Is it Morgaine, if I remember correctly?" she whispered, watching Ryuk's eyes flash with shock. Shock at the name, but even more at how she had come by it. How did you even know that? He had never let Odette know anything about his family here in Amamura. Not once, not ever, had he mentioned it, and he had always been conscious to make sure he never left or kept anything that might expose that. Everything in Amamura has its price, though some come expensive and some are cheap. The real family of some ordinary foreigner archguard named Ryuk? That can be obtained at an even cheaper price, she said. Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed before they settled. Who was he kidding? If someone like Odette wanted something like his background, how hard was it to get? Really? But somehow it also made him feel a bit vulnerable. "So, you knew I was in love with another girl and still," he said, looking at her suspiciously, and she rolled her eyes. "Oh, please don't look at me like that. You're also guilty, too," she said, though Ryuk's suspicious stare didn't fade. "To be honest," Odette said, her eyes regaining focus, and her voice firm, "I'm not a fan of love itself, as nothing good ever comes from it. I've seen the mightiest of warriors have it become their only weakness, and easily crumble to dust because of it," she said with a deadpan expression. And Ryuk couldn't exactly argue that. Although sometimes, it can also make dangerous an initially weak warrior, or devilish an already powerful warrior. But that's rarer. Too rare to not be worth the risk of falling into the trap, Odette said, before turning to look into his eyes. "And if I held such a view on love, then you should understand how I would find having to share it with someone else," she explained, and Ryuk looked at her before asking, "Then why?" "I could ask you the same thing too," she said. "Why say yes to me when you're already in love with her? Because I'm promiscuous? Most men are," Ryuk said with a smirk, but it was wiped clean when Odette shook her head at him. "That's an obvious lie." "And how would you know that?" he asked doubtfully, watching as she reached her hands forward, fingers trailing the pink hue that colored his hair. "It's sad," Odette whispered. "What is? When was the last time you looked in a mirror?" When Ryuk thought about that question, as much as he hated to admit it, he couldn't even remember when. His lost expression made Odette giggle, and he turned back to her with exasperation. How does not looking into the mirror become sad, though? It doesn't even do anything. He defended, and she patted his cheeks. It's not the mirror itself. It's the fact that you never go back to take a look at yourself. I'm guessing in your head, Odette said, her finger trailing to his temple. All you have in it are probably things yet to be achieved. You never take a step back to look at what has already been achieved, do you? He remained quiet. If you did, Ryuk, Odette continued, then you'd realize you're really exceptional for one your age. And the more exceptional a being is, the more he can do things most ordinarily wouldn't, and even do them better than most. And one of those things is love, she added, and his eyebrows knit together. Saying you have more than one love because you're allowed to sounds kinda elitist. But if you're truly exceptional, you'll find there are people out there who don't mind sharing your love. So, he said, looking into her eyes, you just don't mind? She nodded. I don't. And if I eventually get jealous enough and decide that all of your exceptionality is something I want for myself only, then I can just get rid of any annoying brat I see around you. She whispered. Ryuk couldn't help but chuckle. If you harm Morgane, I'll be mad at you, really mad. You know that, right? She pouted. I know. She leaned in for a kiss, and this time Ryuk didn't fight it. He accepted it, his hands gently holding her face. It was such a sweet and different sensation, like finally being close with someone who was not only at his level, but who even more completely understood him, without him having to utter a word. Like having a motherly figure, but one with whom he could be physically close. How much he wished he could spend more time with her. But, when they both shifted from the kiss, Ryuk whispered, I'm sorry, Odette, but... His eyes dropped, only to be raised by her touch. But what? I plan on leaving Amamura soon. If you sound like you'll miss me so much, then, why not ask for me to come with you? Odette smiled, though her gaze narrowed when Ryuk's expression turned colder. Because things will get really chaotic soon. Noticing the change, Ryuk calmed his heart, his expression returning to normal. Are you afraid I won't be able to handle it? Odette asked, and he shook his head. I know chaos isn't something you can't handle. What am I even saying? You might even be used to chaos more than I ever could. But, this time his voice tuned lower. I think I'll be more at peace knowing the ones I love are far away from it, as far as possible. You sound like you're about to go do some really bad things. Her grin turned sharp, and Ryuk rolled his eyes. And you made that sound like a good thing. Peaceful times are good. Being with your loved ones, kissing, hugging, blushing. Odette tapped his nose, watching pink bloom across his cheeks. Stop it. But chaotic times, they build things peace could never do. Resilience, will, trueness. She leaned back. I like chaos. It's real. So real, I get why you wouldn't want anything you love remotely close to it. I'm glad you understand. He allowed a small smile and she tousled his hair. But chaotic times shouldn't last too long, or you might just be covered in too many scars to bear any semblance to your past self. I won't be gone for long. How long? Maybe 3 years. Ryuk probed, and Odette silently nodded. It left him reeling in slight shock, and she noticed, asking, What? Nothing? He ought to say, but it came as a question instead of a statement, and Odette rolled her eyes. He just sucked at lying. It's just, if I said that to Morgane, she would probably faint in shock. Odette giggled. I've spent 1,000 years in slumber. Ryuk. 3 years. That's as fast as a blink to me. And really, that wasn't a lie. You foolish boy, she teased, a thought crossing her mind. To think you would fall for such an old hag. Ryuk paused for a moment, then rolled his eyes. I never even thought about the age factor, not once. You must have used some ancient charm on me. In the next moment, the world blurred, and he found his face buried within something soft. What are you? His words cut off when a finger pressed against his lips. Odette looked up at him, his head resting against her bosom. If you'll be gone soon, Then it's only fair I hold you as close as I can, she said with an evil smile. Ryuk rolled his eyes and let the silence take them. The peace lingered until Odette broke it. Ryuk, he nodded. What is the Dominaire family to you? The question made him pause before whispering. They're the closest thing I have to a true family. That important? She whispered, her brows furrowing. They're everything, he replied. Then I'll watch over them for you while you're gone. Her promise made him turn to her in shock. Why? If their survival is so important to you, then it's rightfully mine to defend. She caught the pink hue spreading across his cheeks before he buried himself back against her bosom. A sweet smile crept onto her lips. Thank you, he whispered as her hand brushed through his hair. You're welcome. And hey, if you keep hugging me this tight, you might just disappear into me, you know? Her expression shifted when Ryuk's arms shifted beneath her waist, and it tightened even more. You! Hee. How does it feel? The notification flashed by the corner of Ryuk's gaze. He looked down, and right beneath him was the golden world of Amamura, its humongous size, along with the halo of the angelic being that raised it high into the air. All of it was present in his line of vision as he stood there silently, hovering in the depths of space. Just like Endearth, he responded. His leaving. The feeling in his heart, it was just like when he was leaving Endearth for Amamura. Except when leaving Endearth, he had been relieved and expectant, while this time, his heart felt heavy. It was a reasonable feeling. After all, he was leaving a peaceful embrace for a chaotic reality. At least they'll be safer here, he thought to himself, hovering higher and higher into the void. I wonder, he suddenly called out, causing the panel to blink into view. Wonder what? Wonder what happened to the feeling of awe I once felt when I first appeared in Amamura, he answered. You don't feel it anymore, huh? I guess that's a sign you really grew fast. The panel blinked as Ryuk's hands slowly reached out toward Amamura, and then, his two fingers pressed gently against each other. I feel like I can snap it out of existence, he whispered, a sadistic smile quickly blooming on his face. You don't dare, the system said, and Ryuk burst out laughing as he lowered his hand. Of course not, he said, regaining control of himself. Exhaling and inhaling aloud, he steeled his heart. Stay safe, Amamura. I'll be back soon, he said, a wide, confident smile blooming on his lips. In the next instant, his eyes snapped closed, and he fell into a silent state. When he opened them, a new image appeared, the image of a snow-white hydra. Immediately, Ryuk's hand reached out, and a door of darkness appeared right before him. He stepped forward toward it, his foot pausing an inch before it, but only for a couple of seconds, before he resumed stepping forward and soon disappeared into the darkness. The door faded away just a second after, marking Ryuk's complete disappearance from Amamura. But this signified the true beginning of a chaotic journey. According to the system, when he underwent evolution, the process would also replicate in his other clone on the group side. However, the system had also predicted that the massive energy wave from his evolution would have destroyed the spacecraft. That would cause massive damage not just to the spacecraft but also to Elder Selene, Aster, Void, and Isha. So, it had undergone a forceful deactivation protocol. It shut down all the skills Ryuk had activated, automatically leading to the cancellation of the throne shift ability. This got rid of Ryuk's other clone on the ship, leaving him with just his original body. He could no longer swap consciousness, which meant he would now have to move manually from Amamura to the upper realm. Something that would have taken a lot of time and energy. But now, Ryuk could feel the location through his soul bond with Isha. Just as he could once instantly summon his pets to his side, he could now do the opposite, summoning himself to his beast side. He had done exactly this, and the void remained silent for a while, although he could feel himself being rapidly shuffled with speed within the void. Every second that passed in this silence made him feel the connection with Isha solidifying more and more. Finally, he felt the flicker of light and opened his eyes, seeing himself moving closer to a door in the far void. He soon appeared before it, exhaling slightly before taking a single step outward. Step. The sound was like stepping upon a glass surface, and when Ryuk looked beneath him, he truly found a glassy floor. A glassy floor that radiated a chilling coldness, though its surface remained incredibly clear, devoid of any mist or frost whatsoever. He fully stepped out of the void of the door, looking around the place. It was a realm where there was nothing but an unending glassy surface everywhere. But then he felt the familiar aura leading him to raise his head. A glint crossed his eyes, but it faded, and he smiled. Isha. He whispered the words, continuously echoing through the glassy realm. The word made her stir, and what followed was the sound of chains clanking. Right above Ryuk's head was a snow-white lady, barely covered, in a torn white garment. Her legs were bound together, while both her arms were stretched far apart, held by chains. Yes, chains. Gigantic chains of abyssal dark, littered with strange silvery white runic symbols etched upon their surface. The lady wrapped in them looked incredibly minuscule compared to them, almost like an ant tied up in a thick rope. And that lady was none other than Isha. The call made her eyelids flutter open, a weak silvery white light glowing faintly from her disheveled white hair that covered her face. Her drooping head lifted slightly, and she looked at him hovering before her. For a moment, the weak flicker in her eyes brightened, only to dim a moment later when she turned away from him to her pitiful state. Chained up like a prisoner, more than half naked, with disheveled, rough hair. She turned her gaze away, whispering in a cracked and heavy voice, "I look pathetic again, don't I?" Her words rang out through the void as Ryuk looked at her. Truly, she didn't seem to be in good shape, but, "You look better than the last time, though," he said. She turned to him, finding him flashing her that same goofy smile. But he truly was speaking the truth. Last time, her head had been divided and placed into different tubes, but this time at least, she had her body complete. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." The words echoed out in the realm at the same time as they both stared at each other in slight perplexity, before Ryuk's chuckle followed. "I guess we both have a lot to catch up on, don't we?" And she nodded. "So, want to tell me about it?" he asked, moving to one of the chains that bound her figure. "Don't. It will." Isha tried to warn, but it was too late. Ryuk's hand grabbed the chains. Immediately, a powerful crackle of white-colored electricity bathed his figure, but much to Isha's disbelief, it was like a fancy spark of white light simply danced all around Ryuk. His expression never changed at all. He reached his second hand out, the sparks increasing in magnitude, only to be broken apart and shattered to pieces when Ryuk pinched them with his draconic claws. This led to Isha's left hand finally falling from its outstretched position. "I'm sorry, you were saying?" he asked, moving back to her and breaking the remaining chains around her wrist. Her wrists were red from the hard bondage, and when he touched them, he felt her wince in pain slightly. "It hurts?" he asked, but she shook her head. "Just sore." "So, I'm guessing you reached the beast realm?" he asked, moving to the other side. The same scene of grabbing, sparkling white electricity, and the chains breaking apart repeated itself. This time, she could move her free hands, propping herself free from the remaining chain on her wrist. "We did. About 3 months ago," she said, and Ryuk hummed, slashing off the chains binding her ankles. But Isha didn't remain floating in the sky. She fell instead, only to be grabbed by him as he gently cracked the chains around her ankles, completely freeing her from them. "I can sense quite a lot of wyverns around," Ryuk said, and the instant he completed that, the realm sky shattered like a mirror, and landing upon the surface were gigantic, scaled claws. A couple of frost wyverns had their head emerging a moment later, their piercing silvery eyes immediately locking down on both Ryuk and Isha. "The accursed has broken free. Alert the royals." One of the snow wyvern's orders rang out through the realm, as the other wyverns tried to leave. "Halt," Ryuk ordered, and immediately the wyverns paused where they were. Those trying to go back to alert paused in their steps. Those who were preparing to make a move on Ryuk also halted mid-motion. This, a monarch's order. Their piercing silvery eyes soon painted in complete shock when they watched Ryuk continue his walk, Isha in his arms. And they could do nothing but watch him pass right under their nose. For some reason, I can't seem to smell that smelly cat close by, Ryuk muttered with squinted eyes, extending his senses to search for Void, but the rascal was surprisingly nowhere to be found. He was returned to the Void Cats, Isha responded. Ryuk muttered a slight, "Oh, I thought he had been locked in some special cage or something." "And Raksha?" he asked, eyes blinking with curiosity. She got banned from appearing within a kilometer distance of the Wyvernoid Kingdom, so she had no choice but to leave, Isha said, and Ryuk's eyes dimmed. "That sounds hard," he muttered beneath his breath. His eyes brightened up once more when another thought popped into his head. How about Elder Selene and the Snow Wyverns from Enderth? Hope they're reintegrating into the kingdom without much problem. They were never allowed to step in before they were denied and told to leave or risk imprisonment, Isha replied. "Tell me they didn't return to Enderth," he said, and she shook her head. "I'm not sure. I never got a chance to talk to her or them before getting locked up," she explained. "Sounds like they really got hit with the worst-case scenario." The system panel blinked before Ryuk's furrowed gaze. "Yeah. Things never worked out the way I thought they would at all." He had thought Elder Selene and the Frost Wyverns would have no problem being allowed into the Wyvernoid Kingdom. And while he wasn't sure, Raksasa would stay with them. He at least expected Isha and Void to be together with Elder Selene. But this? "So you're the lowlife she bonded with?" A voice brimming with utmost disdain suddenly echoed through the silvery corridor, and Ryuk turned behind him, watching a being descending. A white-haired humanoid man, with scales of white covering half his face. He donned white priestly-looking robes, dotted with expensive-looking gems. A look, and it was clear to the eye that he was far from ordinary. While he had an order for everything to halt, the being didn't seem to be affected by it at all. And Ryuk gave his disdainful face a deadpan stare before looking away from him. He turned to Isha. "We have to look for Elder Selene and the Frost Wyverns. Hopefully they didn't go far from the kingdom. But before that, you pathetic lowlife. You dare to ignore me?" The curse was so loud it drowned out Ryuk's words, and he noticed Isha wincing in pain from the shockwave that followed the roar. He allowed the shockwave to pass before he continued. "You need to get you low." The words had not reached halfway when the sound of something tearing through an object rang out as the man felt something hot around his chest. "Huh!" He turned his head down, and there he found a pair of cold purple eyes staring at him. His mouth opened and white blood came flooding out. The Frost Wyverns, who were paused in their positions, had their eyes widened to the maximum as they got to witness the full scene. The scene of the invaders' right hand covered in white scales, having torn right through their leader's chest, and more horrific, the silvery white heart that was still pumping within those bloody claws. "You have my attention now. Happy?" Ryuk whispered coldly, ripping out his hand as the man fell from the sky like a sack, spasming on the ground. You! He kept spamming the word like a broken record, unable to believe the sight of what ought to be his own heart pumping within the claws of one he had regarded as low life. He watched in even more horror when Ryuk's claws slowly folded into the heart and, "Don't!" His claws crushed the heart tightly, and it exploded with a loud bang, blood flying through the scene. The second it exploded, the Frost Wyvern took its last breath and died immediately. Even in death, his eyes remained wide open in shock at Ryuk, who gave him the same deadpan expression, before his hands moved and he snapped his fingers. The echo rippled with energy, and all the Frost Wyverns forcibly halted in the air regained their freedom. But this time they didn't move an inch. They looked from the corpse of the one who ought to be the strongest, slain in one strike before he could even react, and then back to Ryuk. Icy droplets of cold sweat rolled down their faces. Ryuk, of course, noticed the change in the room and was a bit perplexed by it. He had expected everything to immediately blow up into chaos, with attacks flying left and right. He was annoyed enough to deal with them now, yet here they were, those who had harbored nefarious intent toward him, hanging obediently where they were and even trying not to breathe too hard. So fear it is, huh? A smirk of realization appeared on his lips, but it paused as he looked down at his arms, finding Isha muttering. He's dungeon priest, Sir Aloyd Lohan, and one of the lower wyverns greatly respected by the royal wyverns. Now, they will come and find you, she said, her body shivering slightly. The sight made Ryuk's eyebrows crease. It was the first time he saw Isha shivering in such fear when danger was not even in sight, and even more, while she was in his arms. Yet it did not stop her fear. Seems like whoever she referred to as they must have cast quite the omnipotent shadow in her heart. Enough to wipe out the feeling of safety she ought to feel from being beside you. So, it's like she was greatly frightened by something? Not just something. A power far beyond her. The system corrected and Ryuk's feet began to hover off the ground. He stretched his claws toward one of the frost wyverns, who immediately froze up. Tell me, Ryuk said, and the frost wyvern noticed the young man's hair shift from white to a complete pink, surrounded by dots of purple. Where exactly do these royals stay? He asked, watching as the frost wyvern shakily turned its head to the side. Good, he muttered, his eyes changing from shimmering purple to brilliant pink, and he turned to eye each of the wyverns. Now, all of you come with me. The instant he gave the order, all 7 of the frost wyverns in the room had their silvery eye color change to a bright pink. Immediately after, they began hovering robotically and followed Ryuk, who moved up, bursting through the roof. When he appeared in the sky, he exploded like the sun, brilliant arcs of pink devouring the entire area for thousands of kilometers. Immediately, every frost wyvern in the region looked at the unnatural halo, and that look sealed their fate. All of their eyes turned pink. The humanoid ones were forcibly stripped of their transformations, reverting to beastly form. Those in caves came out, rising into the air. The scene of more than 100,000 frost wyverns gathered around a single silhouette, all their eyes shining with the same pink glow, was more than perturbing. What are you doing? Isha whispered in his arms, looking around her at the congregation of frost wyverns. She looked into their eyes and saw nothing. No emotions, no feelings, nothing at all. It was like they had been robbed of their souls, or something had switched them off and replaced them. When she turned to look at Ryuk's pink eyes, it occurred to her what was happening. You'll see it all soon, Isha, Ryuk said, flashing her a smile, and for a second, she saw it, deep in his eyes, the image of a ginormous being standing in an ocean of white flames, with teeth grinding in fiery rage. Ryuk took a step forward, and all the frost wyverns in the lower side of the wyvernoid kingdom moved. Their presence cast a shadow that spread toward that part of the kingdom, an unreal part of it, the very air utterly different from the lower side. They were divided by a wall covered in silvery white energy, and immediately horns were blown, loudly resonating through the entire royal area of the wyvernoid kingdom. What followed were numerous humanoid beings rising swiftly into the air, their eyes narrowing in disbelief at the scene before them. Such a scene, only they could have done this. Half a kilometer away from the dividing wall, Ryuk raised his hand, and the hundreds of thousands of frost wyverns behind him all opened their maws. Frost brewed within them, each wyvern pouring the maximum energy they could unleash into one attack, and the next moment, his hand fell. Immediately, hundreds of thousands of frost balls rained down upon the walls. The wyvernoid guards who stood on the walls could only stare blankly at the raging frost balls. Their senses were so overwhelmed by the sight that any thought of defense vanished. All they could do was watch as the barrage inched closer, carrying enough power to instantly erase the walls and them along with it. Yet, just before the frost balls bombarded the walls, a total of 5 beings stepped out into the sky. All held each other's hands, leaving 2 free at the ends, and quickly, space rippled as a runic symbol appeared, morphing to form a white portal. From the depths of the portal, the gigantic phantom of a wyvernic head appeared out of from its depths. The head opened up its maw, unleashing a terrifying absorption force that dragged all the approaching frost balls' attacks into it. It devoured everything, leaving nothing in the air. Yet under the force of the attacks, it cracked, shattered apart, and dissolved into snow that drifted down from the sky. The attack of hundreds of thousands of frost wyverns was effortlessly thwarted by just 5 beings. 5 beings, but one gaze, and it was clear to see that they were far from ordinary. The group consisted of 4 females and a single male, all draped in cloaks of white. But what made them really different wasn't their celestial beauty or radiant shining scales, but the horns growing out from their foreheads. No frost wyvern Ryuk had seen, including the royalties just a few distances away from him, had horns, but these 5 did, making them quite special even amongst royalties. When he turned to his arm and found Isha's shivering worsening, he knew for a fact this was most likely who she referred to as they. You took the controls of the mind of our lower brethren, and forcefully used them to attack us. One of them said to him, and in your hands is the accursed one who has been imprisoned. You must have forcefully broken her out of imprisonment. You've sown chaos and discord, a sign of an enemy. Another one of the females added, all looking at Ryuk, who, in reply, raised his hands. Return. He commanded, and the wyvernoid royalties witnessed as the wyverns around him turned their backs and left the scene. They returned exactly where they were before their minds were taken over, and Ryuk dimmed the pink aura around him, allowing their minds to return. Most continued on their business, while some looked around groggily, witnessing areas lit with destruction, or wondering why they had shifted into their wyvernoid forms. If I had come to your gate and simply knocked upon your door, Ryuk said to the 5, I would have been stopped by the idiots of your kind, and that would have wasted me precious time, something I cannot afford, though my actions were chaotic much, but here you all are. He completed. So your goal was to meet with us? They asked. My goal is to ask you a couple of questions, he said, watching them look at him from his shoes to his face. That prompted Ryuk to add, and how you answer them will determine whether you will survive to see tomorrow's sun or not. His words obviously reached them as he watched their facial expressions morph into disbelief. Is that supposed to be a threat? My first question, Ryuk began, as silence fell from disbelief. A couple of months ago, a group of frost wyverns came to your kingdom, all the way from a lower realm world called Endearth. They were led by an ancestral-level frost wyvern, Selene Nagas. According to one of my own present at the scene, Isha, they had been turned away right at your kingdom's gates. He narrated, though there wasn't any sort of following in their eyes. They simply looked at him blankly. Where are they now? He asked, and the reply came. Thousands of new frost wyverns come into the kingdom every day. Do you expect us to know where each one of them came from? Or the name of their leader, who, according to you, is some nobody from a lower realm world? This time, it was the only male amidst them that replied to the question, and in return, Ryuk nodded slowly. That nobody you don't remember is the reason you died. He voiced out. I died. The man scoffed, but not a second later, he found a shadow cast out over him from behind. He looked and found Ryuk no more, and when he turned back with speed, he was halted in motion when a claw grabbed at his head. He tried to dodge, but was too slow. Ryuk's claw grabbed at his head. Be gone! The man roared out, his claw slamming out and smashing straight into Ryuk's chest. Alas, it hung just 5 centimeters away, and Eldori looked at his outstretched hand, finding it covered by pink restrictive runes. I can't move. It occurred to him. Let him go. The roars of the 4 others echoed as attacks blasted up to Ryuk from all sides. But halfway through to him, snap. A single snap and every attack hung in the air, along with the frost wyverns who got stuck in their motions. It left just Ryuk, Isha buried in his chest, and Eldori, whose head remained grabbed, his eyes looking around in shock, before they turned to Ryuk and froze. He spoke no words, nor was he given time to regret or beg for his life. Ryuk pinched the head harder with his Draconis claws, bypassing the skull and piercing right into his brain. And then, veins strained over his arms as he exerted strength upwards. Blood splashed through the air as Eldori's head was forcefully ripped out of his own neck, blood splaying through the air like rain. Snap! A second snap and time resumed, though every attack heading for him also faded into nothing but snowflakes, scattering upon the ground. The Wyvernoid royalties could only stare in confusion and shock as they witnessed a body randomly fall from the sky amidst the snow and collapse. And in Ryuk's other hand was none other than the head, which he slowly let go of, allowing it to drop onto the dead body. You, Eldori. Forceful inhales and exhales left the lips of the other four in the group, unable to believe the sight of their own, but they weren't given the time to mourn. I'll repeat for the last time. His words were like a decree, wiping out the rage they felt in their hearts as the aura of death lingered in the skies. It gave them no peace to feel for their companion's death. Instead, worry and fear about their own. Where are the group of frost wyverns from the lower realm of Endearth, and led by an ancestral-level frost wyvern known as Selene Nagas? Ryuk asked, turning his soulless gaze to the remaining four. Only now did it occur to them what type of horror the young man before them was. A stare down between him and them occurred, and in the end, one of the four sighed, and then she snapped her fingers. Immediately, a frost wyvern from the side quickly rushed upon her, whispering in her ear some words. "We have your answer," she said, and a sweet smile bloomed on Ryuk's face. "I'm listening."